Hey campers, George here. I'm back in the man cave. As you can see, I'm editing a video that I started about 9 months ago that I decided I was going to make a hiking staff, and my neighbor gave me a stick. So I started it with the intention of doing a complete tutorial on it because a lot of people had asked about that. Did again. Finally getting to edit it. Unfortunately, over those 9 months, I lost some video. I accidentally deleted it off my phone. All sorts of things. But I finally got it finished. So I thought I'd share it with you. And you'll see the process I'm talking about in my mindset. The whole idea was, this is how I make a walking staff and how I go about it. And that's what a lot of people wanted to know. So, let's check it out. Hey campers, George here, back in the man cave. Not for long though. I got my whittling kit out. Why? The neighbor behind me here gave me his tree. Yeah, his tree. It died. And she has the family over, so it's a little noisy. And Missy at the back there is being silly for some reason. She's running all over the place. Anyway, what I'm talking about is my neighbor behind the cottage here built his house about 1.5 years ago. And when the house was done, the landscapers came in and planted a couple of trees, and they were, I believe they are cherry. I can't remember which kind of cherry they are. And unfortunately, one of them died, and he pulled it out and put it in his backyard, and I saw it and I said to him, what are you going to do with that? And he said, throw it away. I was like, wow, okay, can I have it? And he said, sure, help yourself. So I grabbed it. And here's the reason why. It is, as you saw, about as straight a stick as you're going to get in Minnesota. And it varies in size. You can see it's fairly thick. My hand just fits around there. And it slims off down all this way to this thickness. It's got a little joint here, obviously, but it's so straight I couldn't let it go. And it's been lying out there for probably a good 6 months. And I thought this is the perfect time to do some whittling. You know how I like to whittle. So this, I'm thinking walking stick. Although it's thick like this, it's probably more of a walking staff. How long is it? It's taller than me, the thick part. The thin part is about just over half my height, which means I can make 2 sticks out of this. I can make a walking stick and a staff. Now, I've had a lot of people ask me, you know, I do this every now and again. I'll make a walking stick. I get the urge to do some serious whittling on a piece of wood, and I find a nice piece of wood when I'm trudging or whatever, and I bring it home and whittle it and make a walking stick. And a lot of people have asked me, how do you go about making a walking stick? Well, this is what I look for first. As straight a stick as possible. Now, don't get me wrong, a little curvy stick is really not, I like that. I don't want it perfectly straight because then it looks machine made. If it's got a little bit of curve or character to it, it really makes a difference, and it looks more handmade and natural from the outdoors. I'm gonna say this because I have to. Don't be cutting a live tree. If you see a nice branch on it, Don't whip out your optional folding saw and cut it off. I don't like doing that. I don't like to mess with dry trees. If you go for a walk in the woods and there's a lot of down trees or branches that break off just naturally, high winds, whatever, and they'll break off, and if you are persistent, you'll find one that's fairly straight, and it makes for a fun project to do. So I have this one, and I'm gonna start off. I want to make a hiking staff, which means I'm going to be using the thicker edge of this. So the first thing you want to do is you have to decide whether you want to leave the skin on. When I say the skin, this is not it's bark, but it doesn't have that bark look, if you know what I mean. It's fairly smooth, but I like to take that off and just clean it up in general. You want to get rid of all this stuff and smooth it up a little bit and clean it off. Then you have your stick. Now, you know, it's nice to work with a green stick because the wood is softer. But if you let it mature and then you work on it, when it dries, with a wet stick dries, there's a chance it's going to crack. You know, that's not good. So the longer it's been weathered and the drier it is, the more chance you have of it not cracking or anything. Now, there's ways around that. When you're done with it, you want to oil it and all that sort of stuff, and that helps preserve the wood and stop it from cracking. So the first thing you want to do is clean up the piece of wood. Once I've done that, I look at the piece of wood and decide what I want to do with it.
Here you can see the stick. Now you can see how long it is. And you can see right here, there is this bend. And I'll bring it closer to you. This bend right here, where it goes from thick and suddenly goes thin. What I'm going to do is cut it off right here to make the smaller stick and use the thicker stuff for the staff. So, cut it off here. I'm going to put this stick away and we're going to work on the thick side. And of course I always use my favorite little optional folding saw, number 12. This guy here, this is actually the one I modified. It has the blade and the saw on it. I carry this with me whenever I'm going on a walkabout in case I find a branch. I can cut it off, and this fits in my pocket great. So make sure you have something you can actually cut the branch up, because you don't want to take a whole big branch back with you.
So now I have just the thicker part of the stick. This guy I'll put away out of the weather because it's fairly dry. I want it to dry more. We've had a lot of rain. I was sitting outside. Now I want to get rid of all this stuff, all these pieces, and just cut them off with the saw and just get rid of them and try and get it smoothed off. Then we'll clean it up, take off all the bark and everything, and then we can start working on it. Notice when I'm cutting away from myself. I turn sideways and just cut it. So here you can see I've sawn off all those little branches sticking up, and now I just need to get rid of the bark. You can see a lot of it you can just pull off with your hand and start working it off, and then I'll use a knife and just take off all the excess. So let's find me a knife. We'll use this guy, I think. And you can just slice it off. Notice I'm cutting away from myself. I can't stress that enough, people. Always remember, if whatever you're doing with a knife and you're doing stuff like this, keep in mind,
I'm going this way. If the knife slips or anything like that, where is it going to go? It's not going to go towards me, it's going to go away. So always work away. Never do this. Okay. Don't use your body to brace anything that you're working on. All right, got my little safety spiel out of the way. Here you can see, as I've taken the bark off, the wood is damp underneath. So ideally I need to let it sit and dry a little bit. And here's something else you're going to find. You take the bark off and all them bugs are being at it underneath the bark here. You see that? It's all this wood dust. And you're going to find that as long as it hasn't gone too deep or they've done too much, it's still usable. And you know what? There's a lot of things you can do with that. And I'm thinking right now putting resin in there. Maybe, something like a different color or something, depending on what I'm planning on doing. You can see how they got a little deep there. Pretty cool. But we'll see. When I'm doing this, I'm always thinking, how are we doing? And am I going to be able to use it? So there I've got most of the heavy bark off. Underneath you have this, see this brown sticks up like this. I wouldn't worry about those. Now is the time you're going to look at your piece of wood and see what you're dealing with. This one is, I got to say, is really nice and straight. And now is the time you look at it and you go, this is what I have to work with and what do I want to do with it. When you're thinking about your walking stick, you've now got your base piece you're working with. And you've got to look at things like this. Remember I told you about the bugs? They've eaten that away. Now you can fill that in if you want to. You have a fairly thick piece of wood. It is a walking staff, so it should be sturdy. When you start putting patterns on it or carving into it, be careful that you don't get too carried away and you take the strength out of the stick. You know, you've probably seen mines with the twirls on it. That's a fun project to do. You've got to be careful you don't get too thin because you really weaken your stick. Now a staff, you want to use it supports you. You're going to be digging in with it to climb up a ridge, going down a ridge, jumping over a stream. This is a support you're going to use. It's got to be able to take your body weight. So keep that in mind. Now this is a long piece of wood. Look how long it is. And then now that I've cleaned it up and I'm looking here, you see this piece here? I don't like that. So I'm probably going to have to cut this off. When I have a piece of wood like this, you've got the thick part here and it slims down a little bit. Not a lot, but it does slim down. Obviously you want the thicker part at the top where you're going to be holding. And not only that, that's where most of your carving you're going to be doing if you're going to carve. I'm not saying you have to put patterns on it. You can just clean this up and put some resin spray on it or an acrylic spray. Just put a 550 cord handle on it and, you know, get some sort of wood finish and coat it with that. An oil, something like that, which really brings out the color. And I'm looking at this piece of wood. Look at the color on this wood. Can you imagine when you're going to put an oil on here? It's really going to bring it out. So you got to keep that in mind. You can fill these gaps in. You know, you can get. I use Elmer's clear glue and mix it with sawdust and put it in here and let it dry, and it hardens nice and you can't see the glue, you just see the sawdust, and when you sand it down it looks normal. Obviously you want to try and keep the same color wood. So that piece I'm going to cut off at the bottom, I'm going to keep that because I'm going to need the same wood to fill with. So there's things like that you want to keep in mind. And one thing you've got to be careful of, the bugs go in deep. So you'll be working away and all of a sudden the bug crawls out. You've got to get rid of them because they're going to continue to eat through it. So you have your piece of wood, and now you've got to decide how long you want it. Now this is a staff. The length is up to you. Typically I like a staff that when it's on the ground next to me, the top is about head height max. You don't want it any longer than that. You know, when I'm going to stand up and show you how long the staff is, and then I'm going to look at how much shorter it's going to be after I cut this. Is it going to be too short? Do I want to put a head on here? What do I plan to do with it? You know, I said I got this from my neighbor. You can go out in the woods and find a piece of wood. If you want to try out for the first time and start the easy way and have a nice clean piece of wood, go to the hardware store and buy something like a rake handle, a leaf rake handle, or a shovel handle. Now you have to be careful there because a lot of the times that wood is hard and you have to carve it. So be careful of what you can go and buy, you know, go to the local hardware store and buy a 1-inch thick dowel that's like 5 foot long and use that and carve on it. It's smooth already. It's basically ready for you to go. Just be careful what wood you're going to use, because if it's really hard, you're going to struggle to carve it. I am going to let this sit for a while. I want it to dry out a little bit more. I can feel it's already drying out. The dampness is going away very quickly. So yeah, I have my staff. Now I'm going to see how long it is and decide where I want to cut it. I do like this idea because they cut it off at the base, just above the roots. They didn't dig it out, they just cut it off. But look at the bottom here. Can you see this? Look at this wood. It is all gnarly and whatever. Can you see that? It's great. That's really cool. Now, if I was inclined to, I would put another piece of wood on here and do one of those old man of the woods heads on there, because this is really cool for it to go into. It'll form really nice into there. Cracks like this are not a big problem as long as they don't go all the way through. You can see the crack is not deep, but it's started already. So what you can do is fill it. Get some resin or some wood dust and mix it with the glue and put it in there and let it set, and now you've sealed up that crack. You know, you can see how it's just drying out and it cracks. So don't cut it off because it has a crack, because it really adds character. And if you fill it, you have some imagination. You know, you could get resin and color the resin and put it in there. So now you have a piece of wood that has all, you know, a blue or a dark green, a yellow, a red, whatever, in all your cracks. And if you're consistent over it, it'll look pretty cool. And you know, resin, you can sand it down and clean it up. So there's lots of things to do when you have your piece of wood when it's done. Let me show you how tall this stick is, and then we see where we can cut it. So as you saw there, I can't even touch the top of it with my hand stretched up. So I've got a lot to play with here. So right away, cutting this piece off here isn't going to affect my wood. However, if you like this sort of thing, it does give it character. You know, you've got a little bit of a bend in it. I don't need it because look at all the knots I'm going to have in it that I cut off. They're going to show up on it, so it will look natural. So I'm going to cut this off here. I'm going to keep this little bulge here because I might just land up keeping it because it's a little bit bigger, and that's the part that's going to be hitting the ground all the time. It's going to tend to split if you don't support it in that. And anywhere that there is a knot from a branch going out, it's a really strong part of the wood. So there you can see, even with having cut off that piece at the end here, I've still got a lot more that I can take off. And you know what?
if I cut it off here, it's not going to make a big difference. Next up, we got to clean it up and round it off and get rid of all the knots sticking up like this. Maybe, you know, I'm not going to get rid of them totally, but I'm going to clean everything up. And the way I typically do that is I use some 80 grit sandpaper. You can get it at a local hardware store, and you just go over it. You'll be surprised how much that can take off on the wood. So keep that in mind. Don't go crazy with it. Just get it all cleaned up and smoothed up so that there's not any sharp pieces sticking out or anything like that. You don't want that. Things to remember: always be safe, cut away from yourself, never use yourself as a brace. By the way, if somebody's sitting by you, you don't want to cut towards them either. So you got to decide where the handle is. Now, that's a different story. When you're talking about a stick that you stand and hold, everybody thinks 90 degrees, like this. You can see my elbow. If I'm standing there, this is 90 degrees. No. Take your hand up about the thickness of your hand a little higher, right there. You can see now I'm not at 90 degrees anymore. I'm a little bit less. That's the ideal position for your handle. Now you do it when you're standing next to it. Obviously I'm sitting down, but that's what you're looking for. And the reason is it gives you more leverage when you pull down. If your hand's here, you don't have as much leverage as you has to pull down from there. Now when you have a walking stick, you put your hand on top of the walking stick, so it doesn't matter. However, the length of the walking stick, when you put your hand on top of it, make sure you're not at 90 degrees. All right, I think that's enough for today. I'm going to let it sit for a day or two, and then I'm going to come back and I'll clean it up with sandpaper, and then we'll decide what we're going to do with I'm going to carve this. I'm not going to leave it plain. To be honest, this would be a nice plain staff. What do you think, girl? Huh? Think that'll work? Don't be licking it.
There we go. An easier way is to do it with 550, and you've got plenty of it to do it. But you'd use the same process as well. And there's other things you can do with it. I've done other things with it, but this is a nice basic way to put a handle on it. Didn't have enough leather. These were a little bit too short, but it'll work. So here we are. I'm basically done. I seriously thought about putting resin in the bug holes. I have resin, I just felt I didn't have enough. I was thinking of a nice bright green, but I don't have enough resin. Maybe I'll do that later and fill them in. But here it is here, the handle. Not enough leather here as well, but I wanted to show you how to put a handle on. They can do the same method with any rope, 550 cord, whatever you want to do. And you just make sure it's tight, pull it through, and it'll hold just great. 550 cord, you'll need a lot more, but when you're out and about and you suddenly need to tie something up, you've always got that 550 cord you can use. So here was that basic pattern I just did because I could. And here I got a little fancy, but I got a little out of hand. These nutshells, because I thought they looked kind of owlish, so I thought I'd put them in the hole and build it up. So I did that. Kind of worked out okay. And of course this I just left the way it was. Put this, it's actually aluminum piece on top here, and shined it up a bit. I don't know if you can see that, but
Shined it up a little bit, not much, 1000 grit, and just cleaned it up. And then I put this Elmer's glue and red paint and filled those cracks in. You can see there and there. It adds some bling, the handle, and then just some very basic shapes, carving shapes, pretty straightforward. And this is what I'm talking about, filling this stuff. Now, I decided to leave it because I didn't have enough, but maybe it'll add to it. And then at the bottom, I put this on. Now, I got glue everywhere, but it's a spike. So the problem with spikes is on rocks and that, it's kind of slippery. You got to be careful. I put it on because in Minnesota, in winter and early spring, when the ground is wet, it's muddy and slippery, and that gives good grip. In winter, you have ice, things like that, so that gives you a good grip. So really, this would be my winter, early spring walkabout staff. You can buy these things, I'll show you, and I cone down the piece of wood. It has a hole in it. I put a nail in there just to make it secure. Very sharp point on it. And you can buy the ones that don't have the sharp point, just flat at the bottom there. Once again, be careful. Rocks, they'll tend to slip off of that. I personally like to just put a steel band around. You just find a pipe, cut off a ring on the pipe, and put it at the bottom and glue it on there. And the ring, the steel ring, stops the wood from splitting and coming apart from you banging it down and things like that. Let's go outside and see what it looks like, and I got some tips for you. So you can see how high it is. Now this is a little bit longer than I normally have. It's not an issue. If it's lower than your head, you're not going to catch it on any branches or anything like that. Another thing, and I can't remember if I told you this, it's been such a long time. You don't want it below your chin. One of the reasons is you're walking, you trip, and you catch yourself under the chin. So be aware of that. When you have a walking stick, it's down by your waist. If you trip or something, there's no chance of it catching you underneath. So remember, if you're making a staff, at least keep it up to here. You don't want it below your chin in case you trip. And of course, my odd-looking owls in their little nest. Got some bark, put it on there. And here is the top piece. Just some aluminum that I fixed on there with a screw, glued it in, and then just cleaned it up. And your shapes and everything. If you look, it's kind of shiny. I like to use acrylic spray. It's a protectant. It dries really hard, and it gives the wood a little bit of scratch resistance on it. I normally put 2 to 3 coats on, very fine coats, and that I find enough to stop things like you bang it against something, it doesn't chip or mark it. It kind of protects it. So there's and I'm sure I've explained to you the difference between a staff and a walking stick. A staff is really there to support your weight, help you up inclines, down inclines, check for safe ground. You on ice or thin water, ice water, you can break it up with this. You can check your footing with it. It's something to protect you. If you are in a state that has a lot of snakes, this gives you some distance to keep away from them. Things like that. So really there to support you when you're walking, help you get up a steep slope. You can dig in and pull yourself up on it. Same thing going down, you can put it in and rest on it and give yourself support going down so you don't slip and roll down the hill type thing. Another good thing for having a staff like this is if you like me and walk around with a tarp and a hammock, well I used to, I'm getting a little long in the tooth for that. You can use this as a something to hold up your tarp in the middle. You can make yourself a little shelter. You get caught in the rain or something and you want to get out of that. The advantage to this is you can stick it in the ground just like that. Put your tarp over, tie it down, and you've got a place to sit out of the weather. Handy to have, and like I said, they're fun to do. And you know, what can you do with them? Well, the only thing limiting you is your imagination. Only thing you have to remember is be careful not to reduce the strength of your stick by going too thin when you're carving and things like that. So there you go. My latest walkabout staff. You all be safe out there, especially when you're trudging on your own out there. You need something like this to help you if you get in a situation. They can help in many ways. And of course, making them is fun. Don't forget, when you're out walking, keep your eye out for sticks. Can't go wrong there. And don't forget, like, share, subscribe. You know the story. Pretty sure we'll be back. Go on a walkabout or something. Who knows? Just saying. Thanks for watching. Always appreciated. We'll see you again soon.